Todd Klindt has been in IT for a very long time and also SharePoint MVP and now Microsoft 365 MVP. He does a lot of work regarding administration and infrastructure management, and his topic for today will be congratulations, you are now Teams administrator, and he's going to talk about what is involved in that role. So I hope we have Todd with us right now.
I think you do.
Yeah, hello, Todd.
Good afternoon, Tony. Good morning, everybody else. And afternoon, wherever you're at. Okay, so getting everything ready. Like everybody else, I've been immersed in Teams, but this Teams live meeting thing is a little new. One thing that I have learned just recently is when you're doing a Teams live meeting, don't follow after Renee. That's a huge shoes to fit into. So hopefully I can do that. So, like Tony said, I'm going to be talking about this abrupt promotion that a lot of Office 365 MVP or administrators got to being Teams administrators now, and just what that means for folks. Tony did a great introduction for me. My mom couldn't have done a better job, though she would love to try. But here is my contact information, so feel free to reach out to me. I have Twitter and my email minimized right now, so if you tweet me right now or email me, I can't get back to you. But here's how you can get a hold of me. This whole worldwide thing that's going on there's a great crazy change 2 months ago. We went one day from having big offices and fast internet and all that to, oh my God, everybody's working from home, go, 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 go. Now, when that happened, as is always the case, the community stepped in. The SharePoint community is world renowned for helping people out. And immediately all of our social media channels were flooded with tweets and blog posts and LinkedIn stories and YouTube videos and interpretive dances on TikTok and all this stuff about how to make things better for users. So a lot of the great things that Renee talked about earlier and some stuff that's going to be talked about later. And those were really helpful because we had a huge workforce who had never video conferenced before and had no idea what they were doing. And they were just thrust into this. And so those were really helpful. But I noticed as an admin and my admin brethren, we were underserved. There were no great videos or interpretive dances on what to do as a Teams administrator because a lot of folks were already Office 365 Microsoft 365 administrators, and they do a very good job of systematically rolling things out, and they just hadn't gotten to Teams yet. So, you're going to, under normal times, if you were going to introduce Teams, there would have been planning, and there would have been meetings, and there would have been test groups and user acceptance testing and all that, and it would have been slowly rolled out. It wasn't going to be a thing where Wednesday everybody worked in the office and Thursday everybody worked from home. And by the way, our entire business runs on Teams. And that is kind of the idea that I had for this session, was for this new administrator who's just been thrown into this role, who didn't have a chance to do all the planning that they would have otherwise done. Here are some things that I have learned helping some of our customers make that transition. So the first thing is just kind of management, how you manage this thing that is Teams. Now, obviously, we all know about the Microsoft 365 admin portal. And there's all that there on the left. If you expand, you've got the Teams portal. That's an obvious place to start. One of the things that I always recommend to folks is just poke around, be curious. Now, and the reason that I say that is because a long time ago, and Tony was very generous by not giving years, by saying how long I've been in IT. It's been a while. But one of the things that put me in the position where I was with IT was when I started using SharePoint, I was very curious and I just went in and clicked everything. Now that was before the days of central admin, but I went into the administrative interface and just clicked every link, read everything, turned every switch, rang every bell, just to figure out what happened when you did it. Now these were the days, dark days. You had to walk uphill to the server room. It was very bad, but there weren't test environments and things like that. And so my users were sometimes not a big fan of my curiosity. So one of the things I'm going to tell you is there's a bunch of knobs to switch and things to try. Go out and get yourself a dev tenant before you do that. in Teams. So Microsoft has a developer program, I think it's like developer.microsoft.com. You can get a free Office 365 tenant, go in there, click all the things, change all the settings, or you can actually go to just office.com and set up a trial tenant, and you get that for 60 to 90 days. We will assume from here on out, when I tell you to do things, that you have done it there first and broken things and learned a lot before you do it in your production tenant. So one of those pieces of advice is to just go into the Teams Admin Center, look at all of the settings, just start getting ideas on things that are appropriate for your company, because there's just, there's all kinds of settings you don't know about, you don't know what you don't know, and just going through and reading the screens will give you ideas on what you can do. One of the things that I want to mention also is PowerShell. Anybody who has suffered through any of my sessions knows I have a deep, eternal love for PowerShell. And like the admin screens and all that, every product team writes their own admin interface. So much like the Teams administrative page is separate from the SharePoint one and the Exchange one and all of that, the Teams PowerShell is also separate from the other PowerShell modules. So one of the things that you're going to have to do is going to have to go down and download that Teams module, get that installed on your system, practice that a little bit. Make sure that you know how to connect to your Teams tenant. Again, because it is a separate connection, much like connect to SharePoint, connect to Exchange, those are different. So try that, get that connected. It may feel like you should be done at that point when you download the Teams module, but unfortunately you are not. Teams kind of grew out of Skype for Business, which grew out of OCS, which grew out of LCS. There's this long train of products that have gotten us to where we are with Teams. And Skype for Business is the most immediate predecessor. And to do all of the Teams administration that you might need to do, you need that Skype for Business module as well. And I bring that up for a couple of reasons. We had a customer that had this problem. They wanted to set up the voicemail option inside of Teams so that we could have a phone number, customers call us and leaves a voicemail and it's in Teams and gets emailed around and all of that. There was one setting that had to be set in the Skype for Business module. The setting that there wasn't a commandlet in the Teams module to do that, had to do Skype for Business. Without resorting to too much hyperbole, installing the Skype for Business PowerShell module took about an hour, required a reboot, and I don't know if it required the swearing that ensued, but that seemed to help. So my advice to you is go ahead and get that thing installed now. It legitimately installs like no other PowerShell module I've ever installed, and I've installed dozens over the years, and it will require a reboot. But there is that one setting, and there was no other way to do it. There was no admin interface for it, so know that is in there. It's been a while since I've done that dance, but there was the last time I checked 30-some commandlets that had Teams in them in the Skype for Business module. So know that you might need that one as well. The next one I have on the list is the PowerShell. The SharePoint PNP. We all know how all of the Microsoft 365 products mesh with each other, and they've all got their fingers in each other's pies and all of that. And so there are some things that you can do in the Teams PowerShell. You can also do it in other PowerShell, and it's a little bit different depending on, and it might be better depending on what you're trying to do. And so while you're trying to make some changes for Teams, because now you have to worry about that, the SharePoint PNP might be a better way to do the thing that you want to do. So if you don't already have that installed, shame on you, for one. You should feel horrible about that. But go ahead, make that right, install that now, and get used to that. And then another one that I kind of wanted to add that's a new one to the team is the Graph SDK. So this is very scary. I'm an admin. I have always been an admin. I have mocked developers. They are my mortal enemy. The SDK in this SDK is software development kit. It's got that D word in the middle. Don't be afraid. It's just a PowerShell module for the Microsoft Graph. If you have not done anything with the Graph, it's kind of a weird, scary place. At last year's Ignite, Jeff Snover did a video on what the Graph SDK, or what the Graph is, and the Office Fabric and all that. That's a great watch. Go find that on YouTube. It kind of explains how all this fits together. But the Graph SDK is a PowerShell module that gets into the Microsoft Graph and just lets you poke in places that you didn't even know existed. And there's all kinds of little tweaks that you can do in Teams and SharePoint and all this kind of stuff. That's a good one to just get familiar with. Get familiar with it for two reasons. Number one, the Graph is just unlike any other product you've ever interfaced with. So just kind of getting like how do you authenticate with it and all that. The other thing is the PowerShell that is generated with this Graph SDK is not done by a human. It's not lovingly typed by programmers. It's created automatically with this thing called auto rest. And because of that, we get all these great options we don't get anywhere else. Auto rest essentially just hits the API and creates a commandlet. So there's 800-900 of these commandlets or something for the Graph. But as you start tweaking Teams, this gives you ways to make changes or find things, presence information, things like that in scripts. So that's a good one inside of there. So check out those management tools. Management duties have expanded, and you can see here in the picture I've got connecting with the Teams PowerShell, and that's how we connect. Connect Microsoft Teams. Unlike a lot of the other modules, the Teams module currently doesn't have a prefix on the commandlets, so that takes some getting used to. But you can see here that lists all my teams. Those teams are private teams as well as group-backed teams. I have blurred out the names to protect the innocent, and then I just randomly blurred out some GUIDs because I like the blur tool in Snagit. That's optional. You don't have to do that. It's a lot of fun. Also, I've got a blog post at the bottom that has all of the Office 365 PowerShell modules that I use for my own things and customers and all that. Part of my contract with Syskit, if I do a presentation, is they have to let me pimp my blog on all the slides. So this is the first one there. You'll notice I've been consistent so far. There's been one on every slide. So one of the things that Renee talked about a little bit is that not everybody has a fancy office to work out of at home now. Everybody was just kind of thrust into it. Now, I've worked from home for over a decade now. I actually do have an office so I can leave at night. I've dedicated hardware for working, but not everybody has that. And because of that, not only is all the things going on that you have to worry about, but congratulations, you're a Teams administrator. You are also now the home IT support for all of your employees. Your promotion has been huge. There will be no increase in pay commiserate to that, but your resume is going to look awesome. Your business card is going to be very impressive. And so as you start doing all the things that Renee talked about, you're going to find out there's these varying degrees of situations that your users are interacting with at home. And so that's going to fall on you to make that work, unfortunately. So there's some things that you have to do. First off, just internet connection. That's something that not everybody's addicted to the internet. Come to find out that my situation with that is not universal, but some people just don't have that fast of internet. I've got a friend of mine that lives across the street. They are outdoors folks. They've got little kids. They had a 15 meg internet connection. They mostly just used the internet connection to check the web, buy too much stuff on Amazon, stream some stuff here and there, but they were outdoors folks. And then 48 hours later, they're both working from home, they're schooling their kids from home, and their internet connection just couldn't handle it. And there's going to be a bunch of people that are in that same boat. So you're going to have to help them, because Teams, now we're going to be doing all these video conferences because that's how we're going to keep that, eye contact and that personal stuff, and it's going to fall on you to help them with that. So one of the things to do, just know there are a lot of speed test tools and get familiar with those. Have your users try those out to kind of see what their internet connection is like from different places in their house, and we'll talk about that in a minute. When you do the group video calls, the things like we're doing here, know that each one of those calls take between 1 and 2 megabits per client. So if you've got somebody that's got a 5 megabit connection, it's probably not going to handle that very well. So they may have to upgrade things like that. Another thing to remind them, and Renee touched on this in his session as well, that a wired connection is always better than a wireless connection. So just know that. And again, the wireless connection might be great for going out to eBay or streaming the BBC or whatever, but it might not be good enough to have a 9-person video call going. And so this is one of these things where they might say, well, my internet was fine a week ago. Well, it was fine for what you're doing, but we're putting a little heavier demands on it. So be ready to have that conversation with them. Honestly, be ready to start shipping out network cables, because that just might be something they don't understand, but just towards using a wired connection instead of a wireless one. Another interesting thing is, even though their wireless is good and they can't, or if they can't run a cable, making some general changes about where the wireless is at can help tremendously. my friends across the street, they're now doing video conferences all day long where they weren't before, and they were having a lot of problems. And I was talking to them about it. Of course, we were being safe. I was shouting across the street at them, and they were talking about how they just couldn't get a good enough connection. The video conferences were choppy. So I stepped in to try to help them out, and I asked them where things were at, and they said, well, because of where things are wired, our wireless access point's in the bedroom, and it's, you know, kind of underneath the dresser back behind a thing. And I'm like, huh, so you've stuffed your wireless access point behind a large chunk of wood and a bunch of clothes, and it doesn't work very well. And so what ended up working out well for them was I just told them that during the day, take that wireless access point, slide it out from under the dresser, give it some air, let it breathe, let the sunlight fall on his face a little bit. And that was all they needed to do. They probably moved it legitimately 6 feet. And then at the end of the day, when everybody's done working, they just slide it back under the dresser so nobody trips over it. And that was all they needed to kind of get over that hump. And now their video conferences are better. So just think about those kind of things, because again, you are these people's IT help. One of the nice tools that Microsoft has provided for us for Teams is a thing called the Call Quality Dashboard, which is very difficult to spit out, at least in English. And this is the screen that you're seeing on the right here. And this is at your tenant level, the ability to see what the experience is like for the people in your tenant on Teams calls and video calls and things like that. So this is helpful for you to kind of get an idea of what's going on, what people's experience is. If you've ever been on a Teams call and at the end you get the thing with the stars that says, what was your experience like? If you're not a jerk like me and just click dismiss all the time, if you actually click one of those stars, that's also reflected in here. So this gives you an idea of what your experience is for your company, so you can start talking to people, reaching out, things like that. Plus, I just like bar graphs and things, so it's fun to look around in. You can get to that if you're in the Teams admin. There's a link on the left, or when you get these slides, you can click that link there, and that will take you to it. One of the things that I've talked to a lot of my friends about with their companies is now they have to VPN. I see my picture covered up. So it's not split tunneling with the VP, split tunneling with the VPN. So a lot of companies, you went from working inside the company and now everybody's working from home. And if you still have assets that are inside the company, Salesforce or file shares or whatever, your users are going to have to VPN in. And so then that becomes, there's some network things with that. Your security folks, if you're big enough to have them, they might not like split tunneling. And split tunneling is this idea that when I VPN into a company, if I do not have split tunneling enabled, when I VPN in somewhere, all of the traffic from my computer now goes through that VPN connection. So obviously all the requests for Salesforce or whatever the on-site database stuff is, file shares, whatever, they obviously go through the VPN. That is the whole point. But anytime I go to Amazon or if I play solitaire and it's downloading the news, that also all goes through the VPN as well. The idea being that you don't want anything creepy crawly on the network, getting on the machine that has company data and doing some bad stuff. The bad news is, number one, because 2 months ago, not everybody worked from home, those VPN concentrators are probably working harder than they've ever worked in their lives. But number two, with Office 365 traffic and Teams traffic, it doesn't do you any good because that traffic's going to go into the VPN concentrator and then go right back out to the internet. So consider enabling split tunneling. And so that tells your VPN client, and the VPN server has to allow it in a lot of VPN cases. It tells your VPN client for things that I need to go on-prem for, go across the VPN. But for Teams, just jump right out to the internet and then go forth and do that. That's good for a couple reasons. Number one, it relieves congestion on your VPN concentrator. Number two, Microsoft, lots of smart people there, they have this idea of the Office or Microsoft 365 front door or the Azure front door. They have these points of presence all over the world, and they try to figure out where you're at and route you to the nearest front door so that you get onto the Microsoft's network as quickly as possible. And that gives you your best experience. So now if your packet is going through the VPN and being encrypted and encrypted again, and then going to some remote office and then popping back out to the internet, it screws the front door thing up. So talk to your security folks and see if you can enable split tunneling. That makes a big difference for a lot of folks. Another thing to consider if you have a workforce that doesn't have great internet, they can't slide their router out from under the dresser or whatever, is Teams allows you to have meeting policies. And this is the ability to go in per user and set policies on a bunch of different things. And some of the things you can do to help your users that don't have great bandwidth is you can disable video so that Teams doesn't try to do video and fall out and all that. You can also restrict bandwidth. So if you've got somebody that you know has restricted bandwidth and Teams is taking it all up and causing problems, things like that, you can go per user and restrict bandwidth, and that will tell the Teams client on their end not to try some things. And we're going to look at that in another slide. So that's another great tool that Microsoft has allowed. So this is what that looks like. This is in the Teams admin session screen. You go into policies, meeting policies, and you can set that bandwidth down there. Now, like I said earlier, there's a bunch of other switches in here. Read the little information things on them, see what's in there. But these are some of the great things. And again, this is per user. So you can say, Todd, his internet connection is really bad. Crank him down so his Teams client knows he can't do all these things. But the CEO, Tony, whoever, give them everything. Let them do whatever. And again, remember that video conferences take 1 to 2 megabits per client. So kind of do some of the math there. This interface is not very good. So the way this works is you create a policy, and then you go into the policy and you add people to the policy, but you can't always see the people that are in that policy. It's very opaque in that way. So what you can then do is in the same Teams admin center, go over to users and pick a user and click that view policies, and it will tell you which policies apply to that user. So give your policies good names, things like restricted video, whatever, so that if somebody's having problems, you can go in and check their name, see what policies apply to them. But that can help you deal with some low bandwidth situations as well. Now, this is not exactly an admin topic, but this is more like help desk IT sort of things. My experience with Teams has been rough, to say the least. I wasn't always a huge fan of Teams, and really what it came down to was limitations in the Teams desktop client for Windows. And a lot of my frustration and angst came from those limitations. And I've mostly moved to acceptance. Teams and I have had some long chats, and we've worked a lot of our problems out. And part of what helped me get there was utilizing multiple clients. So before we talk about how I do that, let's talk about what options we have. There are multiple Teams clients because it's all in the cloud. So you have the mobile client, so you can join calls on your phone, your tablet, or whatever. So this helps. Renee was talking about trying to get meetings here and there. If the only place that you can get a meeting is, barricaded in your closet or whatever, if you don't have a good laptop or whatever, you can join a Teams call on your phone or your tablet or whatever. Works really well. Don't have any issues with that. Also gives you the ability to plug in a good headset, something like that. You got mobile clients. There's the web browser, so you can go to teams.microsoft.com. You can get into your Teams that way, do chats, things like that. Pretty high-powered things. Also, kind of in addition to that, is the PWA client, the Progressive Web Application. So those of you that have played with PWA apps before know that that is just really a fancy way of presenting the web browser. So why did I break those out? The reason I broke those out is because of how the PWA is presented. Especially, I use Chromium Edge. That is my my browser of choice. And once you go into the Teams app, teams.microsoft.com, click Install App, it creates this PWA. It is a separate app. It is treated like an app. It is the web browser. It is the web client, but it's a app. It's pinned to your taskbar. It shows up in uninstalled programs. If I click a link inside of a Teams chat, it doesn't open up in that PWA. It opens up in my browser of choice. It's a really great thing, so check that out. So why is this important? Why does this help me? So like, for instance, right now I'm doing this Teams meeting. My desktop Teams client is doing that. I can't spawn another instance of the desktop client. It's a singleton, it only works in one. So I've got a PWA version of the Teams client going off on another monitor that is my work one. If you've got video calls, you can open up the chat in one window, but it kind of makes a disjointed thing, especially if somebody's presenting something and you want to make it full screen. So now you can PWA join to the same meeting and you can do text or whatever, or maybe it's a big meeting and you want to be back channeling with somebody in your company discussing things. Hey, that slide was great. I can't believe those sales numbers were so awesome. If you've got the meeting and they've got a presentation going, as soon as you chat with somebody else, it minimizes that meeting. Well, now if you've got a second client open, you can take care of all that. And the PWA is a pretty stout client for that. One of my favorite ways that Teams terribly mishandles multiple things going on is if you are in a video chat in one tenant and you want to do a text chat or something else with somebody in another tenant, you'll get the little activity thing. If you click it, it will actually hang you up on the video call. As it switches tenants and switches persons, it will end your call for you. Now, they've got this nice dialog box now that tells you it's going to hang up on you before it hangs up on you. It didn't always have that, but it hangs up on you. I can't believe that's still, in a 2-year-old client, still there. But if you've got the PWA, you can leave the video client going one way and have the chat going someplace else. Or maybe you just have the audacity that you want to have 2 active chats going with 2 people at the same time and not have 17 clicks between everything you type. You can have 2 instances of the client up at the same time. I have made great use of this. I can tell you every single day my entire business runs out of Teams. I talk to all my customers on Teams, and I have the Teams desktop app in one monitor, the PWA and another monitor. I just switch back and forth all day long, and it works great. Oh, and another thing is the Teams client doesn't handle switching tenants with much grace or dignity at all. And so a lot of times if I'm doing something like that, I will leave one instance of it in one tenant and one in the other, so I just have to go through that thing, and it's a horrible thing. But look into that. It stinks that we have to do that, but once I started using the PWA, it got better. So that might be something as your users start trying to figure out how to use Teams and how to manage meetings and all that, make this an option for them. It might make some things easier for them. This is a quick screenshot of that. On the right is the regular desktop client. The left is the PWA. You can see it handles calls. It does video. You can switch between all your same tenants. It's got all the great stuff. I've got a blog post on this as well. I don't have the URL in here, but I've had a lot of great luck with this. So definitely check this out. So a lot of this Renee talked about already, but this is more advice that you can give your end users to have a better experience with Teams. Renee talked about how audio is the most important, and it absolutely is the most important piece of this. I would much rather listen to somebody read the phone book. Do we even have phone books anymore? Read, Wikipedia pages. If it's got good audio, than to have somebody tell me the meaning of life or the cure for foot pain or something. If the audio is scratchy and it cuts in and out, jerks. Audio is king. So headsets are a big part of that. They make your hair look funny. None of us have had haircuts in months, so you get to wear this funny headset and you get the flat spot on your hair. I'm not doing that now. The eagle-eyed viewers will notice I'm not doing that, but my normal headset is this fellow right here, and he does a tremendous job making my hair look even sillier than it normally does. Just got to embrace it. That's just how it is. But it also makes your audio great. And it makes your audio great for a couple of reasons. It gets the mic up by your mouth, so all of the wonderful things you say get sucked right in. But it also keeps your mic from working and pulling audio from the other parts of the room. I had a discussion with a customer, and I was talking to him about this. And it was a customer I know well. We have great rapport. And I was telling them this, and they said, because they were using the microphone like on their laptop, or it was a potato in the corner. I don't know what they were using, but I was telling them like, hey, your audio could be a little better. And nah, it's fine. I've never had any complaints. And I said, well, you might not have had any complaints, but I was on a call with you last week and I could hear your wife on her cell phone talking to her sister in another room. Sounds like her and her sister get along pretty well. Hope the cat's doing okay. And so I was able to tell him all these details from this call that his wife had in another room because his microphone is pulling sound from everywhere. So if you've got a good boom mic or something close, it makes your audio better. Renee didn't talk about it a whole lot, but Teams recently introduced custom backgrounds, and I have found that to be, it's got some value, and it's got some value for reasons that aren't immediately obvious. Like Renee said earlier, not everybody has fancy offices. Some people work from the kitchen table or whatever. So the custom backgrounds give them a way to kind of obfuscate that, to make them feel less self-conscious about that. Gives them a little bit of privacy as to where they're working and all that. The other thing that's fun is these backgrounds let people express themselves. And since we're not running into each other into the office, the goofiness that people do with these backgrounds, yes, it gets obnoxious and everybody's got aquariums and that kind of stuff, but it lets us kind of work on that rapport a little bit and remind everybody that it is actually humans. So I do allow that. I tell my customers we should do that. There's a bunch of blog posts on how you can put custom backgrounds in. I encourage people doing that. I made a custom background of I took a picture without me or my chair here and put that out. So now when we have team meetings, everybody does their team meetings from my office. They've all got the Syskit sign over their shoulder, but it's just good fun. We got to remember we got people here. Finally, training. When I told my coworkers that I was going to be doing this session, I said, what should I be telling administrators to do? And one of my coworkers like, training. I'm like, okay, good. What else? He's like, end user training. I'm like, I get it, training. What else? He's like, oh, and training. I'm like, ooh. Fortunately, Teams has not yet added the strangle through video call option. If it was there, I would have taken advantage of it that day. But the point was well taken. As an IT person, you probably weren't up to speed on Teams and all the things you could do. Your users probably weren't. So below are a couple of good resources, Microsoft's training page. And then Microsoft has this new framework called the Learning Pathways that is Microsoft 365 training, and it's something that sits inside of your SharePoint tenant, and it's a great interface, and users can read through there, and you can control what products are in there. It's great. It's free. So check that out as well. But and to reiterate what Renee said, compassion. We're all in this together. So be helpful with your users. Be easy on yourself. Forgive yourself if you make any mistakes. But the training will help. I had my clock set for 30 minutes. I've got 7 seconds left, so I don't think I ran over. I'm getting the thumbs up from Demir. So I will take this away. And if we have any questions, let's have them.
So we have a lot of questions, so I think it will be fun to answer all of these. So Carrie wants to know, her company changed the name last year, and she's looking into any options to do a tenant rename, or she wants to know if she needs a new tenant.
Well, Carrie, I'm sorry for your loss. That's a rough one. So Microsoft, obviously, you're not the first people to have this request. I believe that Microsoft has something like this in the pipeline, and I don't know if I'm violating any circles of trust, but I think there is some like private beta thing that you can apply for. But right now, if you had to do it this morning, Thursday, your only option is to create a new tenant. Now, that will, again, Microsoft is trying to do that. As you can imagine, your tenant name shows up everywhere, Azure, Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, whatever, and just figuring out where all those places are at and setting up all the redirects and all that is huge work. So depending on what your time frame is, probably moving to a new subscription and tenant is probably the way you're going to go. My information is in here, Carrie. Don't be a stranger. Shout out to me and I can give you some more specific stuff, but there's no magic switch today that you can flip for that.
If I can just add something, so we at Syskit, we participated in this preview, and we successfully changed the tenant name 2 months ago. So if Carrie can apply to that one, I think they will be able to get her to change the tenant name.
So to speak to that, I obviously do a lot of work with Syskit and have for years, and I had no idea that any of that happened. So as somebody who interacts with Syskit all the time, I had no problem. I did not realize you guys had done that.
They're very good at setting up redirect. So if you have an old link with an old company name, it will just redirect. But as Todd said, it's not an open program, and basically you need to apply and you need to go through this application process. But hopefully you can either try that or basically do it when it becomes public. Okay, so we have another question. Is there any chances of being unpromoted from a Teams admin? What do you think?
Well, there's a couple of ways that I can think of that are probably not something that Syskit wants me to lay down on the recording. So, I said earlier, I'm a SharePoint guy. I've been a SharePoint guy for 20 years. I've used every version of SharePoint in production. I'm not a huge fan of Teams. SharePoint was the shining star for a long time, and Teams feels like it's Microsoft's favorite child now, and I don't know how to take that. So I push back against Teams a little bit, but the more that I've been forced to use it, the more that I like it. So before you completely decide to do something horrible to get yourself demoted or otherwise, kind of embrace it, feel it. There's a lot of SharePoint in Teams. There really is, and so I wouldn't move through the stages of grief. You're at the bargaining and the anger stage now. Start working towards acceptance, but I think it's a good place to be.
We have another question regarding policies. Can we set up a policy to allow key users to record meetings while the rest of the company would not have that ability? Basically, it's a continuation of question that we had before, like, is recording meetings safe, or should we allow it company-wide, or what is the best practice here?
Yeah, so there is. So when you get the slide deck, the slide that I've got on the policies, the screenshot that I took just happens to have that setting in it, allow cloud recording. So that's the one that you're looking for. They picked such weird names. Like they didn't just say recording, allow cloud recording. And they didn't just say allow video. They say allow IP video. I don't know what gets into these people's heads. But yes, that is one of the settings you can have. And there is a matrix of where that setting shows up. So let's say Tony, being the guy in charge, obviously he can do cloud recordings. Me being just a working class guy, I don't get to do that. If I start a meeting, the meeting inherits my policy, so it can't be recorded. But if Tony starts a meeting and I join it, even though I can't record meetings, he can, and it's his meeting. It can be recorded. So absolutely that policy is in there, but make sure you understand kind of how the policies are laid down.
We have a couple of quality regarding questions. So somebody asks, when we use custom backgrounds, our meeting quality drops. Is there any advice about that?
So, I haven't had that experience much myself. So obviously there's a lot of CPU work that has to be done on your client side. So if I had somebody experiencing that, I would look at two things. I would have them look at how much CPU RAM, just regular resources, their client is working. And then I would also see Task Manager also has a GPU setting, how hard your graphics processing unit is working. So I would check that out as well. Some machines might not handle it as well as others. If the person having that problem has another machine, so I've got this one, I've got a Surface Go over here. If I was having that problem, I would try it someplace else and see if it was an issue with the machine or Teams or whatever. But there's some things to check there, yeah.
Another question regarding quality. Why does video quality drops when you share presentation with sound option enabled?
So I'm guessing it's just the amount of processing that Teams client has to do. When I was talking earlier, I'm not a big fan of the Teams client, and there's a bunch of reasons why, and that might just be part of that. So I would try another machine, see if it's a machine specific thing. You might try the web client. The web client actually does allow you to share screens and video and all that. Maybe it does things a little differently, but it's just trying to fit so much through that straw, and that could be it. I don't have any surefire fixes, unfortunately.
We have a couple of comments regarding stuff. So somebody comments and says, if you want to get unpromoted from the Teams admin, we should follow Todd's advice from the blog and flip switches into production like crazy. I guess, yeah.
And if you say Todd said it was okay, I'm not writing any notes. No, it's on you.
Another comment is regarding the dev tenant. Somebody advises that you can get a 25 E5 licenses in the developer tenant. So that's a great way to try all the features.
Yeah.
And we also have a comment regarding a government cloud tenant. The custom background should be coming in 30 to 60 days in the government cloud tenant.
Yeah.
Okay.
You also didn't mention there was a comment about how awesome my shirt is. Syskit shirt.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's not let that
is the most liked comment. Yeah, definitely.
For good reason.
For good reason. Okay, Todd. So that is basically all the questions we have. Is there anything else you wanted to share today, or we can?
It's time. I can't wait to see what Sue and Adas have to say. So let's let them take it away.